on Coastal and Progressive Rainbow Forum on Society Bites Radio. Today we'll be speaking with Andy MELE, and he is a candidate for the Florida House of Representatives in District 71. And he's got an incredible background in environment, and he's running a very good campaign, and we're so thrilled to have him here. Andy, welcome.
Yeah. Good morning, afternoon, sometime.
Yes.
Nice to be
here. Yes. And Andy, tell the audience a little bit about your background and your professional career and so forth, if you could.
Oh my gosh, ask a guy to toot his own horn, hey? Okay, so I was my whole bio is on the campaign website, which is AndyMELE4FLHouse.com, all one word, Andy MELE for FL House. And so there, highlights. I was born literally in a sapling, artist studio, summertime thing. We had no running water and heated with a wood stove outside of Woodstock, New York. And subsequently, I went into the Navy. I did a couple of tours in the Tonkin Gulf on a destroyer. I came back. I began woodworking, and I spent 20 years or so building wooden boats. And then wrote a book called Polluting for Pleasure, which was about the environmental impact of two-stroke outboards. Turned out there was like 50 million gallons of oil and gas going into America's waterways every year. That was the equivalent of like 5 Exxon Valdez oil spills every year. So I wrote this book, and some lawyers got a hold of it and went down to Washington, sued the EPA, and won a marine engine rule. So that made there's still some two-strokes out there, but they're old, and they're just not on the market anymore. So they became extinct, and I did that, and I'm pretty proud of that. And then I went and finished college and got a master's degree in environmental science with a focus on environmental economics. My thesis was on environmental economics. And then went to work for an outfit called Hudson River Sloop Clearwater. Sloop had like a big sailboat. In fact, that was the core, the centerpiece of the organization, was a 110-foot overall wooden replica of a Hudson River cargo sloop that we used to sail up and down the river, taking kids out for a 3-4 hour sail. Just a snapshot of the Hudson River environment. We do a trial, talk about it. A busload of kids fit perfectly on the boat. He said had 50, kids and chaperones, and the number of times I was at the docks of the Hudson Valley. This had been going on since 1969. This boat, and people would say, "Man, I remember my trip on the Clearwater." I mean, how many 3-hour experiences do people remember like that? So my term for it was a transformative learning platform. It was literally transformative. People would spend 3 hours there and never be the same. It was really cool. And while I was there, I inherited a 30-year battle with General Electric, which at the time, before Jack Welch ran it into the ground, was the world's most profitable corporation. And they were just refusing to clean up 400,000 pounds of toxic and carcinogenic PCBs that they had spilled in the upper Hudson. And so I finally forced them, through a combination of circumstances, an angler survey that outlined the risk pathway into humans and stuff like that. We forced EPA to get them to the table, and they signed a consent decree, and the stuff has been dredged. So that was another thing that I'm particularly proud of. We sued, and anyhow, a bunch of things like that. I sketched the outline of the Hudson River Park Act that created the Hudson River Park on Manhattan's west side, which had been crumbling, just falling into the river, and now it's a world-class park with many piers that are just pure public amenities and little pocket parks and everything. Like it's a wonderful. Just like a lot of stuff I'm proud of, and so I took the when I started coming down here to take care of my mother. I ran into some people from the Sierra Club, and they introduced me to phosphate mining. And phosphate mining is this extraordinary environmental it's like a slow motion catastrophe. They've strip mined over 700 square miles of Florida's interior. Strip mining is not a pretty thing. You just think of, somebody peeling off, like going out there with a bulldozer or something. No, they dig it up all 700 square miles, and dug up down to 30, 40, 50 feet deep to get to the phosphate. And this means 700 square miles of agricultural land, the jobs, the multi-generational jobs that were there and supported by that land, and also the Florida native habitat, which is some of the most extraordinarily productive land in its own way, productive in terms of the species that it will sustain. Florida native habitat is so biodiverse. It's unique. These guys just go in there and they bulldoze it first. They burn everything out, including whatever animals are left in there, and just it's horrible. So I decided to apply some of the techniques we used on General Electric, which was also a big Fortune 500 company, on Mosaic, which is a Fortune 500 company, and it's been taking a while. But, it took 35 years to bring General Electric to heel, and it's, probably going to take a few more years to stop Mosaic, but stop them we will. It's inevitable. It just cannot go on. So having spent so much time fighting, a whole lot of sort of smaller scale land use battles, rampant development, things like, the spread of Mosaic's minings, and just getting nowhere, and seeing how, thanks to the Burt Harris Act and other statute in Florida, you can't control development. You can't stop, even if a county wanted to stop Mosaic or one of the developers around here, they couldn't, because the Burt Harris Act prevents it. And, then there was the red tide, 2017-28, the apocalyptic red tide. That truly was apocalyptic, and I heard that word being used on the beaches and waterways of District 71 for that whole time period. But, that word said with a German accent, a French accent, Dutch accent, Chinese, Japanese, just everybody was apocalyptic. It was just a horrible, horrible event. So much death everywhere. And so I expected from the 2018 session, I expected they would be all over the obvious things to do, like control nutrient pollution. Nutrient pollution, there's nutrients being nitrogen and phosphorus, running down the tributaries into the coastal waters in a flood of contamination from the agriculture, mostly 75% from agriculture. And the other 25 from a combination of leaky wastewater treatment plants and stormwater, pretty much. And people using fertilizer on their lawns, all the usual, septic tanks are a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of it. But so the 2018 session, they did nothing. 2019 session, they did nothing. And, that's this last session, I guess, which is 2020, they did nothing. Nothing. They came up with the Healthy Water, Clean Waterways Act, or whatever it was. They even named it so that people would think it was the Clean Water Act and that they'd actually done something. People who should know better were confused by it. But the Clean Waterways Act did a little something for helping municipalities and counties get a better handle on their wastewater, but it did absolutely nothing for the straight up major cause of red tide and harmful algae blooms, which was nutrient pollution. So I just think what they called this, I guess they must have been reading my mind up there in the Florida Democratic group, and they tapped me on the shoulder, and I was like, tell me what to do, point me, shoot me, I'll do anything. So here I am.
Excellent, Andy. You have, and that's why I want you to tell it, because you can tell it better than anybody. Our listeners need to know what an incredible record you've had in your past, and how much you've done to help the environment. And God knows, and I just finished interviewing somebody else earlier and about the red tide situation, and we all remember that. If people don't understand this, how serious this is to the Florida economy, if they want to have an economy here, we had red tide, like you mentioned before, and it was a serious economic blow to the state. And then they think that COVID-19 is next. I mean, what do they think's happening? Yes, if you want to retain our economy here, tourism is a big point of it. And if we're going to retain tourism, we have to be considerate of the environment. The environment, people do not want to come to a place with, like you said, with all these different accents you mentioned. You're exactly right. That's where the tourism comes from all over the world, and take, in turn, damage our environment like this. And it's again, because they fail to see and take it seriously to control some of these runoffs that we've got, and how to better manage the situation. And, of course, Mosaic is a big employer in the area, and they have a lot of power and influence. And you mentioned the Burt Harris Act and so forth here. Yes, we've got to figure out a way in order to try to protect our environment, because the people who do this to the environment, they're going to be gone. They won't be here. Some of the big developers will not be here. They'll be gone, and they won't be here to see the havoc that they've wreaked on our environment. But that's a very important core of your campaign. I'd like for you to talk about some of the ways that you think you might be able to help introduce issues. You had such an incredible history here of doing things and getting action on things, that your history with the Hudson Valley there and so forth, and that's just incredible. And I hope our listeners remember that. And what can you tell us about, what are some plans that you would see putting forward to be able to help control the environmental situation here, and how we could take steps? I mean, I know it's a complicated process, but maybe you can start some suggestions that you would like to see happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. First thing I want to do is start, when I'm elected. Everybody says that, the reality is that the odds are real slim that I'll get elected, just because the numbers are overwhelmingly, not overwhelming, but there's 9,000 more Republicans than there are Democrats, and then there's the unknown factor of the NPAs, no party affiliation. There are 22,600 of them that are active voters, and 31,000 of us, the Democrats, and 39,000 Republicans. These are all mitigated by the fact that Democrats are outstripping Republicans like 3-1 on, registering new people to vote by mail. And there's something about vote by mail. The statistics on vote by mail are that, people who vote by mail, who register to vote by mail, are 90% more likely to vote, or some huge percentage more likely to actually vote than those who don't, especially with the wild card of COVID-19, which I call the plague. It is like a plague. And, so once I'm there, when and if I get the Republican who's running against me, the incumbent, this fellow named Will Robinson, he's just a pure conservative ideologue. He has no vision beyond that. He's a follower. And that's what most of the Republicans in the House are. They're just followers. They don't talk. They don't take an active role in debate or discussion. Their bodies are put there, and they vote the way the Republicans and the donor class want them to vote. It's kind of creepy.
It is.
It's I've been told this by many people. They're mute. They're like zombies, and they're zombie legislators. So anyhow, once I'm there, I want to start an environmental caucus, and of course there will be turnover, because every 2 years people come, people go, but there is